So, have you always wondered how to make your recording studio sessions run smoothly, professionally, calmly, creatively? I got you right now. Hi, I'm Reed, and I'm no stranger to a studio, so I thought I would give you my tips on how I go about approaching my sessions, all the way from the setup to mixing and mastering. Okay, so the first thing is I really want to plan. What I try to do is set up a non-paid studio visit where somebody can come, just check out the place. We can talk about what they want to do. And I want to know everything. You know, what instruments are you going to be playing? How many headphone feeds do we need? Are we going to be in separate rooms, or are we going to use headphones at all? You know, maybe they're classical people. I just want to get all of the surprises completely out of the way so that everybody's happy, and I don't want to be floundering when anybody comes walking in the door. Okay, number two is on the day, setup. So I want to do everything I can to have stuff completely set up before anybody walks in the door. When the talent gets here, when the client gets here, the producer gets here, I don't want them to be watching me, you know, in butt crack mode, trying to get some connection to work. I mean, it happens to all of us. You know, get it out of the way before they walk in the door. Everybody would be so much calmer. You'd be really happy you did that. So what that means is that you not only get everything connected, test out all the connections, but you also open up the DAW session, import any files you need to, set up any clicks you need to, set up any cue feeds you need to. You have everything all set. Number three, we get to the session. Well, there's a lot to think about there. And I'm really fond of checklists, I gotta say. So this is basically a checklist video. So now the first thing we want to do is figure out what the nature of the performers are. Like, are they classical or Broadway musicians? Do they perform, for example, with a classical musician, I can say, okay, at bar 3, I'd like a louder crescendo and then drop off and more diminuendo, and bar 7, that's all going to be more staccato than you just did it and whatever. I go through 40, 60, 80 bars with them, tell them exactly how I want it done, and they will do it exactly as you want it done. They're looking at music, they're making, you know, little annotations on it and everything like that. That's really great. Try to figure out. Sometimes you have people who are, let's talk about takes, right? Sometimes the first take is the best one. Usually that's someone who is more amateur, let's say, just for lack of a better word. With classical music people, they will generally just keep getting better and better, and you just have to decide when you're done. With people who are more kind of improvisatory and freewheeling and whatever, sometimes you just have to keep going till you get the take. Sometimes they get better at the middle and then ease off at the end, and you have to make sure you get that middle. Sometimes the first take is the best one, so you've got to be in record, and you can't have any overs or anything like that, because you just might need that first take. Next, always say yes, and say yes and. There's a famous thing that improv comedy people do where you say yes and. So you go on stage and somebody's already said, well, I'm a shopkeeper and here I don't have any customers and what should I do? And you don't walk on stage as the second person and say, no, you're not a shopkeeper. You're a barber or something. You don't do that. Instead you say, yes, you are a shopkeeper, and I think it would be better if you were also a barber. You know, that's the kind of thing you do. And also keep in mind that with people, with your clients, your producers, whoever, they sometimes will come up with some dumb ideas, right? I'm just saying. And but you can't say it's a dumb idea. You have to say, oh, okay, let's try that. You can say, in my experience, that doesn't work as well as some other things, but don't say it's a dumb idea. Just give it a try. And what I found is one out of every 20 maybe. It depends on the person, but let's say one out of every 20 ideas is a really great idea that you never would have attempted. So, stay open to that. And also it helps people feel like they have a say, and it doesn't cut them off. It doesn't limit their enthusiasm either. Next thing is to remain attentive. So I have a situation here right now. I'm in the performance room, but the control room is all the way across the hall, and I generally don't use any visual feedback, just talking through the talkback. So, people come in here and they kind of think that you're not listening. You don't know what's going on. So I'm always attentive in those moments. And if somebody says, I'm thirsty, I'm like, I'll get you some water. Or if they're complaining about something, then I can hear it. I don't have enough light. I'm like, I'll be right in with a light. And so, all that kind of stuff. People get this feeling that you're kind of, you have this supernatural ability to know what they're thinking about, but you're really just being attentive and listening through the talkback. Next thing is to take ownership of mistakes. Now, that's a fine line, because sometimes you make a mistake and you don't want people to feel unconfident about their experience, so you just say, could we try that again or something. But on the other hand, you don't want to lie to people about things. So you need to basically make sure that you're always letting them know. And what it will do is build up trust. So it's almost always better to let people know you made a mistake, apologize for it, tell them you want to do it over again, and have that be the end of it. Along with framing feedback in a positive way, you also want to be encouraging as possible. I had a session with someone not too long ago, a singer, and she was singing something that had scale, and I was saying all the thirds are flat, and she says, I don't know what that means. And, she kind of got angry with me. And I said, well, what would you like me to do? And she said, well, just say that sounds great, and we'll try it again. Okay, well, that may not totally work, because I found that people's mistakes generally stay with them unless they work to try and get rid of those mistakes. On the other hand, though, she did have a point, because if she couldn't understand what I was saying, and especially if she didn't feel encouraged by what I was saying, that can really be a disaster. And it also really hangs singers up. Singers, they're not hiding behind an instrument, and they're very vulnerable in what they're doing. You have to make sure that a singer doesn't start to lose morale, because if they do, then you're going to be in big trouble soon. The other thing that I tell people is I say, I'm like your doctor, and what I mean is I'm not going to divulge anything that you did that's not completely to your liking. So we're not going to use something if you don't like it. On the other hand, we don't erase anything either. And this brings up a good point. Let's try to perform at 120% of capacity. Now, when you're regularly performing, you go out on stage, you really have to keep yourself at about 90% at the most, because if you go too much further, then what happens is you may just completely crack up in front of a group of people, and you don't want to do that. But in the studio, it's a really great opportunity to get some sort of performance that you wouldn't be capable of sustaining. Just go for it. Jump further than you think you could, or higher, or whatever. It's a really great idea to get people to give you some great stuff. Okay, as far as doing takes, so you have the kind of, I do a lot of sessions where it's just two people and they're just playing in the same room. That's one thing, that's great. Then there's also the kind of Franken situation where you're creating sort of your monster from this thing, which has a click, and you did a drum track, and then you put a bass on that, and then you put whatever on that. So when you have people in and they're overdubbing, if you're doing ancillary parts, like say for instance a chicken picking funk guitar part or something like that, try to limit those takes. Limit it to 3 or 4 takes at the most. Otherwise, you're going to be sifting through things forever. If you do 3 takes, let's say, I try to keep it to 3, then, if you don't think you're going to be able to use any of those, move on. Maybe the person will practice it overnight. Maybe they just need a little break or something like that. Just move on. Next thing is when you're dealing with performers, particularly the types who read music, and you get, I'll do cues for games, cues for movies, TV, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'll have the sheet music, right? And the sheet music, what I'll do is I'll lay it out on the floor. Let's say we have 10 cues. And then I'll go through it and I'll assign a number, right? So this one's really easy, that's a 1. This one is really hard, that's a 10. Maybe this one is a 5, maybe this one is a 7, maybe this one is a 2. And then I'll structure the session so that we get the best performance out of somebody. Say, for instance, maybe it's going to be 2 3-hour calls, right? So somebody's going to be spending 6 hours with me. You want to start off with an easy one, maybe not too easy because they're going to still be fresh, then get to a harder one than that. Then maybe after that particular intellectual exertion, you want to go back down, do something easier, then a little easier still, then you take a break, then you come back, repeat the system. So that way you get everything at a good level and you don't exhaust your player. The last thing I'm going to say about the session itself is adopt consistent language. So a lot of times I'm producing and engineering, and so I have a couple of things that I say when we're getting ready to go. For example, once we've discussed the finer points and let's go faster, let's go slower, louder, softer, whatever, I say, okay, stand by. And then I do whatever I need to do, like put a track in record, rewind to the right place, whatever. And then I hit the record button, and once I see the transport moving, I say, we're rolling. This comes in handier when it's not to a click or something. But standby is always in there, and when people are just performing wild, as we say, then I always say we're rolling, so that we're not sitting around not knowing what's going on. And the consistency of using those particular terms every single time is very helpful to help people know what's happening. And it makes people feel unbelievably comfortable because you sound like you're pro. You sound like you've done this 1,000 times, right? That's what you want. Number 4 is editing. Now, as I said before, there's several different types of approaches that you might take to get your production going. One thing is the Franken approach, where everything's overdubbed. That is one way. Another way is when you're in different rooms, but you're still doing a straight-through performance. So, in other words, you have a booth back there. Maybe I have the singer in the booth and I have the pianist right here. And so we're doing something like that, and then we have a lot of good separation. Another thing, though, particularly good with classical music, is when you have performers in the same room, say a violinist and piano, or clarinetist and piano, maybe a string quartet, whatever. And that way, it feels as natural as possible because you're not having to use headphones. So, the way I will approach an editing session like that is I will do it all on the same timeline, and then I will export that timeline as an MP3 and send it to them. And then I will send a markers list, and the markers list will have, like song 1, take 1, song 1, take 2, or maybe bridge, take 1, bridge, take 2, or measure 46 through 78, take 1, take 2, whatever. And then I will send that to them, and I will let them decide from that what takes they want. And then I will get them to send me an EDL, an edit decision list. And that edit decision list is how I will put it together. Sometimes I'll take liberties. It depends on whether an edit works or not. But it's a great way to do it if you have someone who has a limited budget and you want to just make sure that they don't exhaust their budget sitting here with you. Because when they're sitting here with you, they have to listen to the take, then you have to go back, you have to try the edit, et cetera, et cetera. Have them do all of that listening on their own. And in the end, they'll be much happier. And the way I think about it is that I want to do the job, I want to get away from the job, then I want them to come back and do another job so that we're as prolific as possible instead of, trying to get every cent. Probably for another video, but my goal is to never take the last dollar on the table, because I'm not really trying to squeeze people. I just want to give them a good experience, and I want them to have a great recording that they'll always be proud of. Okay, so now my next point is about mixing. Now, with mixing, first off, I kind of like to go it alone at the beginning. I say get examples, get samples of things that they would like. To be honest with you, you should get those in the beginning meeting stage so that you know what the person has in mind, what they like, what they think this piece should be like in their mind's eye. But that having been said, I do like to go it alone if possible, because if you're sitting there for 7 minutes trying to EQ the kick drum or something like that, well, we could talk about whether that's a wise thing to do, but they're not going to know what you're doing. I mean, even if they know a lot about music, even if they know a lot about production, they're not going to know exactly what you're doing, and it's best to keep that stuff to yourself. And it's just like when they're coming in at first, you want them to be fresh, so that they come in and they hear it with new ears and they teach you something about what it is that you've done, as opposed to going down the rabbit hole with you. Now, sometimes they want to be here, and the person who has a sort of a developed sensibility about it is going to know that not everything is going to be perfect at first, and you're building something, and how long should we take on this, and where does our real emphasis need to go, all that sort of stuff. If you have the right client, then it's fine to do that. The last point I will make is don't go too far in any one direction before you share. There's kind of a sweet spot in the sharing. If you go too far, then you will have spent way too much time on something that they really didn't want at all. There's definitely a driver, particularly in us perfectionists, to try and do this amazing thing. But I think it's better to take the risk that someone is not going to understand what you're doing at all, and just give them a good indicator of what it is that you're going to be doing. Ooh, mastering. Oh my goodness, yeah. Mastering is definitely sort of a black art, but there's really, in my mind, there's not that much to it. I'm sorry. I master almost everything that I record. My clients generally like it that way. And on the other hand, I'm in the trenches. I'm not really doing the Rolling Stones. So, people want to keep their costs down. First thing I would say is take some time in between. If you've got the luxury of time and you just want to chill for a couple weeks before you look at the mastering, it's a really great idea, because what happens is that you'll come back and you'll have a completely new perspective on things, and you'll be hearing things differently. The second thing is always have examples. Use mastered, commercially released things to check your work against other work that's out there, because people are going to be hearing your work against other work. If you are sending it out, keep in mind that you may be asked to send stems instead of a 2-track. So people have different views about that. Some people really hate the idea that they're going to get stems if they're a mastering engineer, or they're sending stems if they're the mixer, because a mixer has their domain, and in a way, if the mixer's good, then there really should be little need for stems. Stems would be something that may be asked for in case there was something, you may call them and say, hey, Bob Clearmountain, send me your stems because I don't think the vocals are sitting right or something like that. But I wouldn't ask for somebody's stems unless I was really having some sort of problem. Keep in mind that if you have an album project, in other words, where songs are meant to be presented together as one coherent whole, then you're going to want to make sure that they all have a consistency. I mean, even things that have widely varied genres or orchestrations, arrangements, etc., you will want to have them have a consistency. And this is definitely a whole video because recording music is a sleight of hand, and in that sleight of hand, sometimes you do things that wouldn't necessarily be done the same way, like if you were listening to the ensemble, but I'll get into that more later. Do a dive into LUFS. LUFS means loudness units full scale. There are software plugins that you can put on at the end of your chain, which will allow you to see what your values are, and you can look at some customary values. For example, YouTube. The customary LUFS is minus 14 dB. So that means LUFS is an averaging. So you would play the whole song and then you'd see what your LUFS is, and then you would adjust the level up or down accordingly. But I've said too much. There's also, I use a Waves plugin, but there's also some free software called Ulean, which is a LUFS plugin, which I recommend if you don't have a budget for that. As I said, mastering is a very big subject, particularly because nobody knows what it is. And so I'll have some more to say on that later, but those are a few key points. Lastly are some closing thoughts. First off, no broken gear, no crashy software. Be careful about all that. Make sure your cables are good. Make sure your microphones are good. You don't want to be troubleshooting when you're in the room. Next, do checklists. I love, love, love checklists. There was a study done, did the study in a lower income hospital in the Chicago area, and they found that they were able to reduce infection rates by something like 50% by basically just having a checklist. Do this in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it really helps me with my engineering, because if I don't, I'll always forget something. I'll be like, well, did I check the bundle here, or is 3 connected to 3, or all that sort of stuff. If I just have it down on paper and I just go through and check it off, it's amazing, because again, you want your creativity to be the most important part of this. I have a friend who is sort of, he has a computer setup and everything, not really an engineer, but he'll always call me and ask me if I have a copy of something he worked on. And I say to him, like, what, don't you have like a backup system? Like I have a redundant backup system, which actually read from the future, right? I should have said something about backing up. You have to back it up in at least 3 places. Otherwise, it does not exist. So I say, I have backup A, backup B, and those are disconnected once I've done the backup. Just slow drives, big 8 terabyte slow drives. I just back up the project on each one of those, disconnect them from the main computer, and then continue working on the main computer. Now, he'll say to me, well, I looked for this thing for 3 hours. I'm like, but, and I said, well, tell me what it is about backing up that you don't like so much. And he's like, well, it doesn't really feel that creative. And I say, well, how creative was that 3 hours where you were looking for your stuff? Well, not very creative. Okay, so, if you're doing it and you want everything to seem professional, then you need to have great backups. The other thing is to have a few extra things ready. For example, have an XLR that you're not using, but you could use if there was something that came up. Somebody wants an extra mic. There's a buzz or a hum in one of your leads, something like that. You just have it there already. You have one extra pair of headphones set up, so that if somebody says, I'd like the producer to come in and listen in here, or maybe they say, oh, could Jim come and play some drum or something like that, then you have everything ready to go. You have to think to yourself, music, not tech. That's what you want. And for God's sake, don't update your software when your clients are coming up in the elevator. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for spending some time with me. Please like and comment. Let me know below what I left out or what I talked about for too long. I feel like I've been talking for a long time now. Anyway, thanks so much. I'll see you soon.